Hey everybody, John Michael Bailey, Injury Lawyers. Today we're going to be talking about internal bleeding, what it is, how it can happen, how it affects you now, and how it can affect you for the rest of your life. And even more important, what that insurance adjuster doesn't want you to know. Stick around, there's a lot to learn. Here we go. Hey everybody, John Michael Bailey, Injury Lawyers. I'm a personal injury lawyer. I've been practicing for 45 years, and in that time, I have seen, reviewed, handled, tried tons and tons and tons of cases. And in almost every one of those cases, people would tell me that they realized after the fact or after a while that they were more hurt in the accident or fall than they originally thought. So I decided to start writing some books and share some knowledge. So these, please don't fall over. Okay. These videos are based on this book, which is 2 + 2 = I'm Hurt, The Mechanics of a Collision Injury. That's available on Amazon, but don't go buy it because we're going to be doing videos on this book. And so if you are just a little bit patient, I'll go through the book chapter by chapter and explain everything in there. But we go through every conceivable wreck scenario, and I will show you if you're in this particular type of wreck, sitting in this particular seat, this is where you need to look for your hidden injuries. Yes, we know how to do that. And then these particular things that we're talking about today are covered in this ebook, which is Invisible Wounds, the Top Hidden Injuries. Now, this is an ebook, and because I'm trying to give this knowledge away, this is right now available for free on the website. And if you would like to download a copy of this book, and I encourage you to do that, please follow this link here. It's free. It doesn't cost anything either. Lastly, I am a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer unless you hire us. And I would love to look at your case because we love to help people. And you can begin that process by following this link right here, and that will take you to the website and you can begin that process. Or if you're the impatient type, you can just pick up the phone and call us anytime, day or night, 888-WE-FIGHT. So with all this obligatory language out of the way, let's get into today's topic, which is internal bleeding. Now, a lot of people think that internal bleeding happens only if you're cut or something like that. That is not true. And the reason why I have a skull here and the reason why I have Skinny the skeleton right here is we're going to go through some of the common areas where internal bleeding happens. Now, I want to tell you this right now. Everybody who is hearing my voice has probably had a bruise themselves or seen somebody that has a bruise. Well, guess what? A bruise is internal bleeding. Now, the body, when it bleeds, what happens is the micro capillaries and little bitty veins, things like that, they are ruptured by trauma and blood leaks out, usually under the skin. That's where they call a bruise. If it's deep enough and there's enough blood, they will classify a bruise as a hematoma. That's what a hematoma is. It's a pocket of blood from a bruise from trauma. And then finally, we'll touch on this too. If there's internal bleeding within the cranium, that's called a brain bleed. Again, very, 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 very serious. So let's get into internal bleeding and what types of situations we would look for internal bleeding and what the symptoms are. Well, let me hit that real quick. If you're urinating blood, that's a symptom. If you're coughing up blood, that's a symptom. If you're lightheaded, if you're passing blood in your stool, that's a symptom. If you're lightheaded and dizzy and feel confused, sometimes nauseous, that could be a symptom. Where do these come from? They come from trauma. Where does the trauma come from? The trauma comes from the mechanism of the collision, which directly relates to the mechanism of the injury. Let me explain. Let's take Skinny right here. And let's imagine that Skinny is, here, let me pull him up so we can get a good look at Skinny here. Let's imagine that he's the driver of the car. okay? And let's imagine further that it is a rear end collision and it's with a pretty good little bit of force. Well, as Skinny is sitting here, if he's wearing a seatbelt, he's got a seatbelt that's coming all the way down over here, connecting over here on this right hip. It also begins over here on his left hip. So, and it comes right across his shoulder. So if he is propelled like this, and the seatbelt will catch him, okay? Oftentimes what we will see is we will see a pattern of bruising all the way down through here, okay? Our rib cage was designed to protect our internal organs, okay? But our body was not designed with modern automobiles in mind. And so it's very, very common for us. We'll see a lot of bruising up here in the shoulder area and then bruising all the way down here. And there's going to be bruising and soreness down here at the hip because that's where the seatbelt clips in. So that when you're violently jolted forward, that trauma is going to show with the bleeding at these points. Where else, and again, it depends on the violence. If you're in a T-bone collision and you're the driver, then that car is going to punch straight into here. That means that's going to push your rib cage very violently, and it's going to shake the body and move it. The seatbelt is going to grab you over here and pull you back, which is another shaking. And as a result of that, membranes, capillaries within your organs, and even the organ itself can rupture and bleed. Common injuries are the spleen. The spleen is oftentimes, because where it is punctured. Or little slivers of the bone here can break, puncture your lung. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So you need to be very, very aware and check for these types of internal bleeding. Let's say that as he's seated in the driver's seat, that again, he's hit from behind. What's that going to happen? What's that going to do? It's going to propel his knee into the underside of the dash. And when that knee goes into the underside of the dash, you're going to see bruising all through the knee. That's internal bleeding. And not only that, if you see internal bleeding, you better know that the processes in your knee, and we're going to have a knee video very soon, the processes in your knee, and by processes, I mean, that's how things work. So the bones, the muscles, and the tendons, they're not working like they should. And that bruising is an indication. The same thing up here with the shoulder and rotator cuff. That bruising is an indication that the muscles and the tendons and the ligaments in your rotator cuff and shoulder are compromised. Same thing down here with your hip. That's, again, an indication that the processes, in other words, the muscle group, the bone group, all that kind of stuff, it's not going to work like it should. And so you need to know that the soreness that you feel in your shoulder, okay, or the soreness that you feel in your knee, or we see this quite often, particularly when we have a car that has a manual and not an automatic transmission. You'll get hit so hard that the knee will go like this, and the ankle will actually impact the side of either the brake pedal or the clutch pedal, and will cause bruising all along here through the ankle. Again, the same thing. That's internal bleeding. You need to be aware it came from that trauma, and the fact that you see that internal bleeding indicates that the processes, the ankle group and the job that these parts of our body are supposed to do have been compromised, and they're not going to work properly. And so you need to know and identify that so that you can relate that injury to the doctor, and the doctor can understand how you were hurt. And if he understands how you were hurt, he knows how the best way to get you back as good as you can get. Now, a lot of times with these kind of injuries, like a knee injury, if there's a ligament laxity issue, or if a meniscus or an ACL is compromised, you're not going to go back to 100%, but the doctor can get you as good as he can get you. And that difference between how you are when you have reached what they call MMI, maximum medical improvement, and what you were before the accident is your permanent impairment to your whole body. And you are entitled to compensation for that. But you're not going to get it unless you fight for it. And you're not going to be able to fight for it unless you know where it came from. This is why we're talking about all this, how you were hurt, and that you also have related it to the doctor. And so the doctor knows it's from the wreck. You have to be definite when you talk to the doctor about that. You can't use qualifying language. Well, I think I heard it in the wreck. Well, I might have heard it in the wreck. Maybe I heard it in the wreck. Those are called qualifying words, and the adjuster will use those qualifying words to claim that you don't even know how you were hurt, and therefore they aren't responsible. It is a trick that the insurance adjusters use. They use it every day, and they're very good at it. So don't let them do that to you. Be sure, listen, if your knee or your shoulder wasn't hurt before the wreck and it's hurting after the wreck, it's because of the wreck. So you're going to see internal bleeding all through the rib cage area, all up under here. This is where our stomach and all this kind of stuff is. It's very, very tender. It does not have this protection. All of this area, all through here, this is where our, like I said before, our stomach, our spleen, our liver, all of these things all through here, they can be compromised by the trauma. Remember, we've got that strap coming across here. All of these vital organs within our body do not have the protection of the rib cage and can be compromised. So we must be very, very diligent and look for the hidden injuries to make sure that you get the treatment that you deserve, get the medical treatment that your injuries deserve, and that you get the compensation for the harms and losses that were put on you by the negligence of somebody else. Now, let me move to the last area. Since we talked about the ankle, the knee, let me briefly touch on, if you see bruises on the arm or anything like that, also the wrist. A lot of times when people are going to be in an accident, they will brace themselves, and when that accident happens, they will clench their wrist like that. A lot of times that causes trauma to the wrist and can cause the capillaries within your wrist to break. 2-3 days down the road, you're going to see a bruise on your wrist, and you're going to say, how did that happen? Well, I'm going to tell you, it happened in the wreck. But if you don't report it to the doctor can't treat it, he can't document it, and you will not be compensated for it. So let me close by taking the skull off, Ralph, our skull here, and let me briefly go through the internal bleeding in the brain, because this is critical. There's modern medicine can do a lot of things, but the one thing it cannot do is transplant a brain. And it's very, very difficult to go into a brain and do any kind of a surgery without having dire side effects. Okay. So right here and right here in the skull, I want you to look at that. So this is the top part of your brain, but part of your brain is still right here behind the eyes. And the brain actually comes down to just below your nose, right there. Right there is where the brain stops. So if you are propelled into the dashboard, if your face hits the steering wheel, if the airbag comes out and hits you, you are likely going to have bleeding in your brain, because, let me do this. Let me pull this out like this. This is the human brain. Don't worry, we're going to have plenty of videos about this. But if you look inside here, you will notice that the human brain looks like it's held in a cup, so that when this brain is shaken very violently, it goes forward and then it comes back. Let me get that in there like it's supposed to be. It'll go forward and then come back. And the top half of the brain will move, but the bottom half of the brain is captured within this cup-like area. What happens then is that these areas right here, this top part of the brain and this bottom part of the brain actually separate and are torn back and forth like this. This is called brain shear. And what happens is all of the little capillaries, all of the little blood vessels, everything like that inside there rupture. Now, so what happens when that happens is, when the brain is violently shaken back and forth, what happens is the top part of the brain, this part of the brain right here, can move back and forth. Okay? This part of the brain right here stays inside the cup like this. And what that causes is a rupturing of all of the blood vessels here in the brain, in between here. And that's very, very serious. That's called brain shear. And what that means is now there's all this micro bleeding within the brain, and it shows up because it interferes in the brain's ability to do what God intended our brain to do. So what we need to know is that we can figure out where the bleeding happened by a particular type of MRI called a DTI, a diffuse tensor imaging MRI, so we can find it out. So this bleeding within the brain is very, very serious because in the human body knows how to absorb the blood back into the blood system, but the brain cannot do that. It's not designed to do that. So what happens is that shearing action, the brain moving back and forth like that, it causes all the little capillaries and all the blood vessels to burst, and it causes a brain bleed. Now, we can figure out where the brain bleed has occurred by a type of MRI called a DTI, diffuse tensor imaging. So we can figure out where the injury is. But so what happens is that when the brain goes back and forth like that, it causes all the little micro capillaries and things like that. When it goes back and forth like that, it causes them to burst and bleed deep inside the tissues of the brain. There's no way in the world that modern medicine can get in there and try to address that. The brain just has to heal the best way that it can. The brain heals differently than tissue in the rest of the body. And in the brain, when it reabsorbs the blood, it leaves a hole in your brain. Yeah, I said a hole in your brain. So it leaves holes in your brain just like Swiss cheese. And you know this causes problem. We can figure that out with a particular type of MRI called a DTI, which is a diffuse tensor imaging. And if you have a brain bleed that is a traumatic brain injury, and don't let anybody make light of that. It's very, very, very serious. So these are some of the types of the internal bleeding problems that we see. I want you to be aware of it. Thanks for listening. I hope you found this informative. Again, I'm John Michael Bailey, John Michael Bailey Injury Lawyers. We would love to help you with your case. We're open 24/7, 365. And our number is 888-WE-FIGHT, and it's answered every day. We never close. Our motto is, if you're hurting, we're working. So please give us a call. Or if you don't want to pick up the phone and call us, you can follow this link here and go to our website and begin the process of us beginning to look at your case. So we're here. We're here to help. We'd love to help you. We would welcome your call. And again, one last time, please like, share, and subscribe to this. There's a grumpy old man named Algorithm that works for YouTube, and so we're trying to keep him happy. So please like, subscribe, and share this. Tell your friends about it. Send them smoke signals, Morse code, however you communicate with them. Tell them to come check it out. Remember to remind them this is free and it doesn't cost anything either. So call us. We're here to help. 888-WE-FIGHT. 888-WE-FIGHT.